Greetings, everyone. This is Pamela Lorenzo, your host of the Leaders Without podcast. Today, I have a great guest for you, my new good friend Cynthia from Philadelphia. We're part of the same container, the Sacred Surrender, with our common good friend and alumni of my 3-week Launcher Podcast Challenge, Mary Gooden. And yeah, so we get to know each other through this process of being each of us part of this book, which will go live on April 1st next week. Super excited, where we all get to share our story in a chapter. This is my first time being part involved in such a project, and Cynthia as well. So there's a lot of things we can talk. Cynthia is a very heart-centered lady. She loves helping people, especially her mission statement and tagline is all about supporting people to love themselves, be the best person they can be. And yeah, so let's. It's a lot of good things we can unpack. So, Cynthia, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. So good to be here. It's an adventure.
Absolutely, life is an adventure.
It
Pleasure's all
is.
mine to have you
Yeah.
here. So as I told you last time we spoke, the types of conversation I'd like to have is to look under the hood, so to speak, to see what's in your heart, to have a heart-to-heart conversation, to get to know who's the person behind the title. Ready?
Ready. Let's
All
go. Yeah.
right. So we're gonna talk about the book and your business and the impact you're having in the world later on. But first and foremost, for people who don't know you, who's Cynthia as a person and as a human being?
I am an eternal learner. I have always kept learning, and I'm still learning now in my almost my last eight. I'm almost 80, so I'm 79. So I
Oh,
obviously I'm
wow.
still learning. Not many people my age are doing the intense learning that I'm doing, but it's just who I am. I was talking to my son about it the other day, and he was laughing. He said, "Mom, you're the female Tom Brady." Even though Tom Brady's still young and he's in athletics, but he keeps on doing his sport beyond when people are expected to, and that's me. I just love learning and trying new things, and so I'm having new adventures all the time. Like this is the first time I will be a published author. That's exciting.
That's amazing. And honestly, I wish that by the time I get to be 79 year age, I'm as active, as alive, and as full of energy and as driven as you are. You're an inspiration for all of us. Seriously. And
Thank
I
you
mean
so
it.
much.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. So now I'm going to ask a series of rapid fire questions to further get to know you as a person. Ready?
Mhm.
All right. So tell us, Cynthia, what makes you happy?
What makes me happy is obviously being with the people I love. I mean, I love that. I love having an intimate conversation with people and about meaningful things, and that's of course the work I do. So I'm always enjoying my work. I'm thrilled when I'm at the ocean. I absolutely
Oh,
love the ocean. So that's one
beautiful.
of my really special places. And when I'm learning something exciting, when I learn another piece of the puzzle that helps me to understand how we as human beings function and how we can change, how we can
Beautiful.
grow. When another piece comes in, I'm like, wow, this is so exciting. So that's why I keep going, because I keep learning.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, what makes you smile?
All those things I just talked about. And also I love, when somebody's funny, dry sense of humor. I like laughing at ourselves, in a very
Mm,
affectionate way. Like, aren't we weird, we human beings sometimes, the things we do, this kind of lightens up my life with clients.
mhm.
Just kind of laughing at the way we are, not in a mean way, in a loving way,
Beautiful.
be lighter about ourselves.
Beautiful. Now, let's talk the happiness factor a couple of notches even higher. What makes your soul come alive? What sets your being in fire in a good way?
Yeah. So if I am at the ocean in a beautiful restaurant, having
Oh,
a
yeah.
great conversation with a friend, I am in bliss. And I moved to Philadelphia a little over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, I guess, just before the pandemic. But I have managed to go back to Maine since I moved 3 times. I've always lived within a couple of miles of the ocean all my life until now. So
Yeah.
I miss being close to the ocean. But I managed to go back and stay at a resort for like 4 days on the ocean with a gorgeous, gorgeous view of the ocean, just priceless. The last 2 years I did that, and I was just in absolute bliss the whole time I was there, because I'm like relaxing, but I'm looking out the window at this incredible ocean view, and I was in bliss. And then all my good friends came to visit me and had wonderful conversations with me. So I'm going to do it again this summer. That's my bliss.
Beautiful.
That's my bliss thing.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
You mentioned the ocean, so probably you might have been a mermaid in a past life
could be. Anything's possible.
or a dolphin, you know,
Or a sea captain, who knows, right? I might have spent my life on the sea.
perhaps even a shark or a pirate. Who knows?
We have to be open to all things, don't we?
Absolutely. It's part of the journey. It's all fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, on the other side of the spectrum, what makes you sad and angry?
I think it makes me very, very sad when well, obviously when people are hurting and I hear about trauma, which I do a lot, you know, the traumas that people have had, even the ones we might think of as minor traumas, that you know, everybody knows an abused child is a huge trauma, but then there's the traumas where somebody's not abused, but people give them messages that were very bad for them, you know, told them that they weren't good enough and all that. And even bosses telling people now that they're not good enough, and adults going through that. That makes me so sad. But also, one of the big things in my life that makes me the most frustrated is the industrial complex, the pharmaceutical industrial complex.
Oh, yes.
And the ways that it's all about money and not about taking care of people. The way the medical model, which does some marvelous things, life-saving things in so many ways, but doesn't teach people about holistic ways of taking care of themselves, rather than doing drugs and surgery. Sometimes there are holistic, and I'm very big in holistic health, and sometimes there are things people can do without having surgery or without having damaging drugs. And they don't tell us that. You have to be somebody like myself or you who's a learner who goes after all that information ourselves. It's what makes me upset when I have clients, they're, you know, taking all these medications and they haven't known what else they have to do. They just trust their doctors. And I'm not to demean doctors. It's part of a huge system. The doctors are trapped in it too. You know, I used to have a doctor when I was in Maine who was an osteopath, which is equivalent to an MD, but they learn more natural techniques. And he used to be so frustrated with the whole system because he
Yes.
couldn't do everything he wanted to do without losing his license.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's a
really sad
system.
indeed.
So that's one of the things in life I would say that's the most frustrating for me. You know,
I'm
that
I'm
whole dynamic.
all with you on that,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah,
because we have all the technology right now to heal all of the disease in the world, to clean all the pollution and all that, to eradicate once and for all hunger, poverty and all that, but they're not doing it because it's more profitable to keep it that way than to they're not in the business of curing us, they're in the business of keeping us sick
right,
and the
right.
planet sick in the process as well. But
Yeah.
I have a feeling that things are turning, the tide is turning, and now we're gonna go all because I've seen since the pandemic, you know, even though the pandemic has been horrible in many ways for the world, I think everything happens for a reason. There's always a blessing and a positive in every situation, even in the worst tragedies, is that we all needed it as a human species to awaken us to really focus on what really mattered. And we see as a result of that, a lot of people, you know, in the spiritual world, a lot of people talk about, you know, awakening and ascending. And I see the energy around me and people around us becoming more mindful, people becoming more heart centered. And I can see that's all. And I've been, even with in my small, modest way, talking to people around the world, I notice that. And I see a change of, you know, frequency, vibration around the world. So
Mm.
I have a feeling that things are turning and a lot of, you know, clean energy are going to come out soon. The world is going to come back to, not come back to what it was before, but it's going to be a much, much better world. And
Yeah.
this is the most exciting part. So I think things are, the tide is turning and for the better for humanity.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a matter of time, you know, how much time is it going to take? And we want it to happen soon, but it's going to happen. It's got its own rhythm and it's going to happen in the way it
Absolutely.
happens. And
Absolutely.
some of the very things that have caused distress, like the use of the computer and all the ways that that's been damaging for our culture, damaging for our children, because I think so many children, you talked about what makes me sad, the children that are so addicted to the digital world now,
Oh, yes.
they're losing the creative aspect of life, you know, going out there and just free playing.
Yeah.
They don't do
Going
much of
out,
that.
getting their
Yeah,
hands dirty, playing with
yeah,
nature, you know, even if it meant falling a little bit, getting bruised a little bit, that's okay because that's how we learn. I remember growing up in this in the late 80s, early 90s in the south of France. For us, two things: playing football, soccer, or running around in the woods and just biking. That's all we
Yeah,
did. We're
yeah,
at the time there was no computers, and it was just kids getting around playing, just
yeah.
playing.
Right. So my point is the negative, there's been a negative effect in some ways of the computer world and the internet and all that,
Yeah.
but I think it's also during the pandemic, we have all this extra technology now to have these Zoom meetings. We can talk with people all over the world.
Exactly.
That is huge in this whole reawakening of the
Absolutely.
human race. So I agree with you. I do think it's coming. It's just I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, what scares you?
Let's see, violence,
Yes.
violence. I experienced some trauma as a child. Not a lot. I was lucky I had a pretty good childhood, but I had a few instances of severe trauma. One of them was I was attacked by a German Shepherd when I was 3,
Oh,
and I
wow.
had no adult with me. I was with a playmate down the street. In those days, a 3-year-old could play down the street. You can't imagine it today. It's a different world
Oh,
today.
sure.
But in those days, I was like 5 houses down with a little 3-year-old in
Yeah,
somebody's
same here.
yard. I reached over to pet the dog, and he jumped up and bit me in the face. And I was in the hospital for a month. I mean, it's pretty
Oh,
severe.
no.
So that
Wow.
trauma, on top of a few others, caused me to be more afraid of violence that I wish I wasn't. I wish I didn't have that part of me. And I've healed parts of it, but not all of it. So that's
Absolutely.
my fear
Wow.
would be of violence. I think that would be the thing that would be
Wow.
most frightening to me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can imagine that being a horrible thing to go through, especially when you're that young.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I can't even imagine how I got home. Somehow, no adult came and found me. I walked home, and I went in. I just remember going in the house screaming. My mother came and took me to the hospital in a cab. She had to call a cab because that was a different world. But anyways, obviously I survived it, and luckily for me, I was so young. My mother said that the scar went all the way up my cheek, all the way up, but there's no
Wow.
scar because I was only 3, and the 3-year
Wow.
olds have this incredible ability to heal. So I was
Sure.
very fortunate, really, not to be scarred
Did
for
that
life.
experience change your view and relationship of dogs in your life later?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I love dogs. I'm capable of loving dogs when I know them, but I'm more cautious than the average person would be. And I never developed that deep, deep love of animals. It's
Mhm.
like I have this deep, deep love of people. I don't have an equal love of animals. I mean, I can appreciate them, but not to the degree that my friends can that are dog lovers. And I think that was kind of taken away from me. And
Of
my
course,
whole
yeah.
family was traumatized by the event. Not just me, but everybody in the family was traumatized by it because it's a
Totally.
bad thing for a family to go through, and it scares people. So we
Mhm.
didn't. I do think you're right. There's a detriment for me in that, and I see that. I see that I'm not as just don't fall in love with animals to the same degree that some of my buddies do. People who love people usually love animals just as much.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Now, what would you say is your number one personal superpower?
my superpower. I think my ability, my empathy, my compassion, my ability to always see both sides of every story. So when
Mhm.
I work with people, I see how both people are contributing to what's going on. I don't see just one side of it. I'm not just influenced by the predicament that somebody presents. I'm aware of all the other parts of it. And an interesting thing connected to that, I do a lot of work with couples. I love working with couples. I love working with all relationships. And when I was a little girl, maybe around 10, my mother used to have a subscription to a magazine called Red Book. I don't even know if
Wow.
it's still around. And I would be on the coffee table, and I would read it every month. There was a column, "Can this marriage be saved?" And here I am, a 10-year-old girl. I read it, and the first part of it, you hear, Mary, the wife, says XYZ about her husband. You think, oh my heavens, that's terrible. And then the psychologist who's writing the article will say, and but then Tom does blah blah blah, says this about Mary, and then I'd be like, oh, it like changed the whole thing for me when I'd hear the two sides of the story. And I think, like, what a weird thing that a 10-year-old girl was reading that stuff. My mother never discussed it with me. This was just me picking it up off the coffee table. I was a very young reader and I read everything. But I laugh at it now, thinking how that's a lot of what I do is work with relationships.
Do you think that was in a way from the universe to introduce and prepare you for what was to come?
It could be that, yes, absolutely, or that natural interest in me in
Mhm.
how people are different and how how they need to be resolved. Because then in the column, the therapist who wrote it would then talk about how she worked with them and how they came to a peaceful ending. They solved the problem. And I didn't understand the depths of that, of course, but I did find it fascinating. So yeah, I do think it's all connected to my path. Somehow or other, I was to be awakened to that possibility.
That's beautiful. And that's a
Yeah.
great segue. Now, you mentioned when you were a young girl. Let's go to that time. When we're kids, people around us, family, teachers, parents, relatives, they all ask us, so Cynthia, what do you want to become when you grow up? What was your answer as a young girl growing up?
It's interesting. As a young girl, I always said I want to be a teacher
Oh,
and an
wow.
author. And I wrote a little book when I was like 8 or 10, a little
Wow.
book. I illustrated it. It was a child's book, but the whole thing was all illustrated, like 10 or 12 pages, all illustrated with a story and everything. And I really did think I wanted to be an author or a teacher. And when I was in the 5th grade, they taught fractions and decimals. And I thought that was the most fascinating thing. And so one of the things I used to say is when I'm going to be a 5th grade teacher. Now, I never did become a teacher, but that's what I do. That's my life's work, is teaching, right? It's very much a part of giving people new ideas, is part of the work I do as a life coach, relationship coach, and a psychotherapist. I'm
Beautiful.
always teaching.
So, growing up, did you love school or hate school?
Loved it. Loved it. Yeah.
What was your favorite subject?
Um, Might have been math, but I liked them all. Probably math, but I loved all of the subjects. I didn't like geography that much. I didn't relate to
Really?
it. Yeah,
Why?
I probably never had anybody teaching it well. You know how that sometimes you don't have
Oh,
a good teacher?
yes. Teacher's
Like in high
important.
school,
Yes.
yeah, in high school, I had a terrible chemistry teacher, and I didn't like it. I got A's because I did the work, but I don't really like it. And then in college, we had to take a science. I fell in love with chemistry, and then I majored in chemistry. But I always noticed that the high school chemistry was not exciting because it was not a good teacher. The teacher that was the head of the chemistry department was brilliant and a fabulous teacher. So that makes all the difference in the world in who you're talking to and
Oh,
how they
yes.
make the subject come alive for you.
Teachers can be very, influential, because for me, it was the opposite. I was never a math person because one time I used to be good, but then grade 6, a terrible teacher that
Mm.
completely turned me off from math. But I was always, always, always fascinated with geography. Since my father, as you mentioned in my book, he was a geologist, archaeologist. The most influential gift he gave me back then was a world atlas in French, and he was showing me where he just came from, all the projects he's been around the world and was going to next. And I was always,
Yeah.
fascinated by traveling. So because of that, geography has always been my favorite subject in school. But
Mm.
again, the teacher can be absolutely very crucial
And
as
you
well.
had the teacher there, you had your father influencing you.
Oh,
I
yes.
mean,
Oh,
that
yes.
what a wonderful experience. Did you say he was a geologist
Geologist and archaeologist. Yes.
and archaeologist? Wow, what a background he has, huh?
Oh, yes. It was
He's still
very,
alive? Is he still
no,
alive?
he left us last summer. He left us
Oh,
last
I'm so
summer.
sorry to hear that.
Thank
I
you.
know he must have been a very, very important part of your life with
Oh,
that
yes. Very,
kind of
very,
wisdom.
very, very kind. Very, the biggest heart I've ever met was his, because he was
Oh,
all about heart. Oh,
mm.
yes.
That's why you love heart stuff. You love
Oh, yes.
heart-centered people.
Both of
I
my
do too.
parents were very heart driven,
Mm.
and I think that's one of the greatest gifts they gave to me and to my siblings, because we're all heart centered.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Thank you. Now, what was your very first job?
My very first job was working in my father's store. When I was in the 7th grade, my father bought a small neighborhood store, grocery store.
Okay. Okay.
And my sister and I was in the 7th grade. My sister was a freshman in high school. And we worked in the store. We ran the register all the time and get to know all the customers. And so that was a very profound experience for me personally, because I was painfully, painfully shy at that point in my life. I
Oh,
still
okay.
have a shy side of me in certain
Mhm.
situations, but at that point, I couldn't think of a word to say. Like the words wouldn't come, fast enough because I was so upset and being asked something by a stranger. And so customers would come in the store and they'd say to my father, "What's wrong with your daughter today?" And my father would say, "Oh, this is my other daughter. You met Judy yesterday. Judy's the outgoing daughter. This is my shy daughter." And it
Oh,
would be
okay.
it would be embarrassing. It was embarrassing to have people say, "What's wrong with her?" Right. And so I just over time practice superficial conversation, which is what you do in a store situation, and I would hear people say the same thing, because that's what people do. If you work in a store, you see the repetitive stuff. 10 people in a row would say, what a terrible accident up the street last night. Or 10 people in a row would say, what a terrible day, or what a wonderful day. And so after a while, I would initiate, what a wonderful day. But
Yeah,
wasn't I fortunate to have that experience of practicing? It was a wonderful way to practice for a very shy child.
totally, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Now, move forward. Let's talk about your path from the moment you left school to now. How would you describe it? Would you say it was pretty much straightforward? Once you get into one lane, it was smooth sailing, or was it more like it turns and twists like a roller coaster?
Well, it turned rather quickly. I majored in chemistry and minored in math, and loved it. Got a job as a chemist, a very high paying job for that era for a woman. I got married right out of college, and my husband was making less money than me, even though we became very successful. At that time, it was good money for a female, but it was very boring. We were supposed to be in a lab. I was with two men. One was a doctor of chemistry, and one was a bachelor's degree like myself. And we just didn't do anything. I mean, it was just not much happening. So I was very happy to get out of there. And then I got pregnant right away. I just got married. I got graduated in June, got married in October, got pregnant right away, which was the way it happened in those days for Catholic girls. I was Catholic. I'm not Catholic, practicing Catholic now, but I was then. So anyways, then I got hepatitis. So my career, I had to quit work. So I only worked for about 9 months as a chemist. And then I had my first child. Once I had my first child, everything in me changed. The fascination with this child was just mind blowing. I mean, you know how it is. Do you have any children?
Not yet,
You
but
have
I do
nieces and
have.
nephews?
Oh yes, oh yes, and I
Yeah.
love them.
You know,
Yeah.
you know how fascinating they are. So what was so fascinating with me was watching my children develop. And so I started at one point, I was a full-time mom for a while. I loved that. And then when I decided to go back to work, I started teaching parenting courses with a friend. And then people would come up to me because I was so fascinated with parenting. That's what I've been doing full time for 10 years. And people would start coming up to me and asking me, can I have an appointment with you? I want to talk to you. And I'd say, well, I'm not trained for that. And I would refer them to somebody who was a professional therapist.
Mhm.
And then I decided I'd go back to school. Maybe I should get some training. So I did. I went back to school, started taking training courses, and became a therapist. And I have been a psychotherapist for 45 years. So once I made the turn, it's all about holistic health, personal growth, spiritual growth, helping people change, helping myself change. Everything has been interwoven for me. Helping my clients change is all part of helping me change, because I'm learning from me and I'm learning for them. So
Totally.
it's been great. And then in the last 2 years, I've taken another component in, which is I've added some programs, a couple of programs that I offer people, coaching. I'm doing relationship coaching. And I have two programs. One is called Inner Peace for couples, Relationship as a Spiritual Path, which is a 4-month coaching program. And I love that. And then the other one is called Inner Peace for family members with a mentally ill loved one. And that is because I personally have a daughter with a mental illness. And that's what I write about in the book, which we're going to get to at some point, Sacred Surrender, that journey. But I also worked not only in private practice for 45 years with people, but also worked in an emergency room for 17 years, working with the people with a mental health problem that would be referred to the crisis counselor. And I would be the one to help assess the person and help get help for them when they're in crisis. So I have a lot of experience with serious mental health issues as well as mild ones. So that's what led me to this, one of my niches, which is working with family members with a mentally ill loved one.
Okay, that's great.
But I work with all kinds of people, but those are two little
Yeah, we'll
special.
talk about your business in a moment,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
all right. So there is a saying I'm sure you heard, which says, "Change your story, change your life." And by story, I mean what we keep telling ourselves inside our head all day long. So when you, Cynthia, had to change your life, change your story to change your life, how did you do it? Was it to the help of friends, family, mentors, books, videos? Tell us the process you used to change your story to change your life.
Well, I think I've done it many, many times. That's what personal growth is all about. Whoever it is you thought you were, like the shy girl. I don't, that's not my major identification anymore, the shy
Mhm.
girl. And I told you that story of how I just practiced
Yes, at
learning
the
how to do
store, yeah.
superficial conversation. I think I always was somebody who was probably very deep,
Mhm.
and the superficial stuff didn't come easy for me. That's why I told you I love meaningful conversation. I love the depth of conversation with people. So that was one of them. Another one was when I had the courage to start teaching parenting groups. I was sharing with a friend one day my secret wish, because we were both all about parenting. We each had 4 kids. Each of us had 2 adopted kids and 2 biological kids. And so in a deep conversation one day, I shared my secret wish that I'd love to teach a parenting course. And she said that was her secret wish too. So we both um, developed a parenting course together and went to area churches and centers and stuff and presented it. But that was a change in my identity, having the courage to become a teacher of raising children. That was a whole new identity for me. And it's about courage, isn't it? You have a desire to do something, you have the courage to take that first step, which will lead to more steps. And that's, then I went back to school and got training. And so I changed my identity totally. And I remember, being a little bit embarrassed to say that I was worthy of being a therapist. That there's an identity thing in there with a lot of the things that we do. And again, having the courage to do it anyways. Like, I can do this. I am this person that can learn everything I need to learn to be able to help people, because the desire was so strong. Once I saw how I loved it, the desire was so strong to continue. But along the line, there's been so many shifts in
Sure.
seeing myself differently, and
Absolutely.
opening to a bigger self. It's a bigger self. So that what I'm doing now with being an author in a multi-author book, it's like that's stepping into a bigger identity,
A new
right?
one. Absolutely. A
Yeah,
new
and
exciting
it's,
challenge.
yeah,
Yes.
and then there's the courage to do that, to say, I can do this, I can take this step, and I can have a new identity. That's, to me,
Mhm.
it's about having a new identity and taking the steps. And maybe being uncomfortable at some parts, but then saying, I'm gonna do it anyways, right?
Is it a matter of getting, and I'm talking about all of us here, is it a matter of getting a new identity or adding to our existing identity to make it more
Absolutely.
versatile?
I think it's getting a new one and letting go of an old one.
Mm,
Sometimes, like, I let go of the
yes.
identity of being a chemist, or having, utilizing that
Or being
4
a
years.
shy person or being a whatever person. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Absolutely.
But sometimes, but I do think that there's a full self, and we're only identified with parts of that self. And then
Totally.
and I agree with you in the sense that it's like letting go of one part of you, letting it be a small part of you rather than the leading part of you, and stepping into another part that you want to spend more time in.
Getting into a new chapter. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
Awesome. Now, let's talk about the impact you're having in the world. Tell us about your business so far and what you're doing.
So I work with people who want to grow and change, and I work with people from a holistic perspective, which means I include spirituality when people are open to that. Um, and I think doing programs is going to, is as I'm building that part of my business, is going to allow me to have more impact. But I've had a lot of impact on a lot of people, and I kind of am a person who's always thought, I don't have to be a big player in the world. I just want to, whoever I meet, whether it's as a client or whether it's in the grocery store, and whatever. I just want to be a positive force, a force for good. That's just, and it's not any big goal. It's kind of a simple orientation. So I've stepped that up a little bit in starting to do the programs and be willing to be a little bit more visible. And so, but my goal is to help people, bottom line, help people love themselves, appreciate differences, love the people in their lives as much as possible, and have more inner peace. I'm all about inner peace. So that's my goal for myself, to help people in opening up to more inner peace and more awareness of who they really are.
When you say helping people, do you have a specific avatar of the ideal person you can help at the highest level?
I think that people that are open to change, that want to grow and want to change, um, that's the key thing for me. And people who happen to be comfortable with the way I am. my style is comfortable for them. That's what my
Sure.
prayer always is. I hope the right people find me that can benefit from who I am and what I have to offer. Because I'm
Yeah.
the best me I know how to be, but there are other people that are the best them, and different people are going to be attracted to different people. Um, so then again, I do a lot of work with couples, and I love couples work, and I'll tell you why. When both people are in the room, and in this case, we're in the same space online. When both people are together though, and I'm there as a mediator, and they're engaged in the process of changing, and they're willing to take feedback from a trained, skilled mediator, wonderful things happen. So I love that. And then the other niche, as I said, is family members with a mentally ill loved one, because I've been there, done the work myself, know what's involved, know the pain. I think I have a lot to offer those people. And I have to be, in order for them to find me, I have to be a little bit more visible. I have some that have found me, but I want to have more find me, because I know how I could have benefited when my world first fell apart, if I had had somebody like me. And so I want to be that person for other people.
How did your world fall apart?
So my daughter was 20, which my daughter, it started, I had one of my adopted children. I fell in love with her the moment I saw her. Just the day I met her, I was madly in love with her. It was that kind of a chemistry between us always. She was feisty. She was gorgeous. She was a great athlete. She was a great student. She was a lot of fun. And we had a fabulous mother-daughter relationship. And when she was 16, things started to fall apart for her. I didn't understand what was happening, and it got worse and worse. And so by the time she was maybe 20, 21, it was really bad. I brought her to a whole bunch of therapists and doctors, and they only diagnosed her as having anxiety. And it was much worse than that. It turns out she had schizophrenia and bipolar, but it didn't get diagnosed till she was in her early 30s. So she had about more than a decade of really being lost and suffering. She was suffering, but I was suffering too, because she turned her upset about what was happening in her world on me. I had been the mother who had always been able to support her and help her through her challenges. And now I was powerless to help her, because I didn't understand what was going on either. I'd never seen anybody. This was back, in 1986 probably. And a lot less was known about these illnesses than is known today. It just wasn't as commonly known. And I hadn't ever met anybody like her or seen anybody like that in my private practice. So anyways, it was a lot of years, but the upside down for me was nothing was what I thought it was. This beautiful daughter had turned on me. I didn't know how to help her. She was creating havoc in my life. And talk about an identity crisis, all the feelings of insecurity that I had, that I'm not enough, that I'm not good enough. What did I miss as a mother? All that stuff. If I had been, that's what all was triggered for me. If I had had somebody then, one of those brilliant psychiatrists, just tell me that it was schizophrenia and that there's nothing I could do about it except medication, it would have been a whole different journey. But that wasn't the journey I was supposed to have, obviously. So, but it created havoc in our family. All of my children, it had a new sister. This is a different person than they had grown up with, a different person than I had grown up with. And none of us knew how to help. Everybody tried to help her. And then they'd get frustrated, because whatever you did should just turn it on you, that you were not good enough and you were bad.
What do you think was what triggered it? Was it a specific event, or was it something gradual over time?
Yeah, I think with schizophrenia, it's something that if you have a certain gene, it comes in
Mhm.
at a certain age, and it starts usually in adolescence and in the 20s. Occasionally it'll be later than that, but most times it'll start. So lots of times it'll happen when a young person's in college. They may be a brilliant student and doing well in college, and all of a sudden everything falls apart for them. And they may have delusions, they may hear voices, they may be not in touch with reality, depending on how severe it is. They may have a personality change. So a lot of that stuff shows up, and bipolar can show up in childhood, but it can also show up in the same thing in adolescence and adulthood. Everything gets more intense once you leave the sacred womb of the family. Everything gets more intense. So there are a lot of factors, but I didn't have enough education, and you'd think I would, as I was a therapist, and I thought I should know how to solve it because I was a therapist, but I wasn't trained in that area, and none of my friends were. I taught a lot of different people and never really found the help I needed. I got a little bit of wisdom here and there Took me many years to piece it together. And it really wasn't until her diagnosis that she and I could heal our relationship again. We had many years of estrangement. So for a woman who loves children enough to adopt two children waiting for homes, you can imagine what happens when one of those children turns on you
Oh,
and calls you a
totally.
bad
Oh,
mother. It
oh
was
yeah.
traumatic for me. And like I say, if I didn't have my own insecurities, I wouldn't have been as triggered. But I think it would be hard not to be triggered at some
Sure.
level, you
It's
know,
not. It's natural. It's yeah.
you
But I
know.
can imagine this can be heartbreaking at the same time. Absolutely.
It was a very heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for her. I was grieving for her. I was grieving for the loss of my daughter. It's like a death, really. The death
Mhm.
of a person that you adore is gone. So it's that kind of a grieving, but it's a private grieving. It's not like if you lose somebody and everybody knows it, it's like an open thing you talk about. When you have a daughter who falls apart and you don't understand it, it's not something that's easy to talk about with people. I mean, a few
Sure.
close people, but you don't just talk about it publicly because you don't even understand. I didn't even
Mm.
understand what was going on myself. Didn't have the words for it at that time.
So eventually, over the years, were you guys able to make things back together,
Oh
or?
yeah. So once she got the diagnosis and
Hmm.
got on the medication, her brain, see what happens with this kind of thing is the brain is out, the mind is out there. And it's not, everything's going so fast. You've heard of manic, like in a manic state. She had a lot of
Hmm.
mania. Everything's going so fast they can't make good decisions. When they put them on medication, it brings everything down and the brain slows down. And then one day she called me. I hadn't seen her for 8 years. And she was in her early 30s, maybe 31. And she called me one day and she said, Mom, I want to have a mother again.
Oh wow,
And I
beautiful!
said,
Out of the blue.
and I want your help. She said, and I want your help. She said, I want to have, because for years she refused any help. She refused anything from me. She wanted money or she wanted to live with me. And I would give her money sometimes, but it felt like it wasn't doing anything. And I couldn't have her live with me because she was so nasty to me until we had rebuilt. I'd say to her, let's get together for lunch. We'll rebuild our relationship and, we'll talk about it. But she wouldn't do that. It was all or nothing for her. So this day she said, I want your help. And I said, of course. So I did the first thing she wanted me to do. She had a very specific thing she wanted me to help her with. She had a warrant for her arrest in Massachusetts and she was in California and she wanted to come back. It was a false thing that she hadn't done, but it was because when your brain doesn't work, you can't even defend yourself when you get accused of something because you don't have that rational mind. So
Sure.
I called the person that a very close friend of hers was an older woman, and the woman used to let her borrow her car. The son did not like that Cheryl was friendly with his mother, which I understood. I understand why he would be concerned, but it was actually a loving relationship between the two of them. Cheryl would drive her places and take her to the beach and stuff like that. And at the same time, she would let Cheryl borrow her car to do certain things that she needed to do. So the son filed a report with the police that Cheryl had stolen his mother's car. And so Cheryl, there was a warrant for her arrest, and she went to California. She was always going back and forth from Massachusetts to California. And so when they made that warrant, she just stayed away. So she said, Mom, I want to come back to Massachusetts, but I'm afraid I'm going to be arrested. So I went to work, found out what happened, called this woman, and the woman said to me, and this was what I needed to hear, Cheryl did not steal my car. I lent it to her. So once I knew that, I could go to bat for Cheryl. And called a few people, got some information from the courts. Cheryl came back. I took her to the courthouse and we got that warrant removed. We got a court date so we could get that off the book. So we did. So that was the first thing I was able to do for her, very specific. That was got me, so all of that was the start on building the new relationship. She eventually did come back to live with me, which I think she desperately needed to do. But it was a journey. You can imagine. And then it's been a journey for her and her healing. But I will tell you the good news now. For the last 10 years, she is the most loving daughter you could imagine, Payman. She's sweet,
Beautiful.
she's loving. Some of her brain power is not intact because of what she's been through. She's got a lot of PTSD and she's got the mental illness. She's on medication for that. But she's a loving, sweet person. She works part-time. She has a boyfriend. She's a kind soul.
Beautiful.
So there's a happy ending, but it was a lot of
Oh
learning
yes.
for me.
Oh yes.
Big journey for me.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. Wow. Now, Let's talk about your book, the chapter that you're involved in. So
Yeah. Yeah.
tell us about that.
Yeah. So that's the story that I've just been telling you about. The title of the chapter is A Call to Surrender When Mental
Uh,
Health Turned Your World Upside Down. And
wow.
the reason I chose that story, there's a lot of stories I could have told, just like you. We all have lots of
Mm,
stories in our lives, lots of journeys. But this was the biggest challenge of surrender for me, to surrender to the fact that I had a daughter who didn't like me, a daughter who badmouthed me to everybody, a daughter who was very quick to tell me everything that was wrong with me. It was a reality. And for a while, I was I'm like, how could this be happening? This can't be happening. I was in denial. I just couldn't believe it. And then finally, I began the journey of surrender. Like, this is what is. I have to do what I can do to deal with the reality of this is what is. How do I heal myself, so that I'm not suffering over this? Can't help my daughter's suffering, but I don't need to suffer myself. I've got to figure out how. And that was my journey of surrender. And it was long. It was not short. And it was very hard, as it might have been for you, to condense my story into one chapter,
of course.
3,000 words or less,
Oh,
right?
yes.
That was really hard to do. And I had my daughter read it um, the other day. I wanted her to hear it with be present. We don't live in the same state right now, so I wanted her to hear it when I'm present. And so I read it out loud to her, and then I wanted her reaction because I thought she might be really wounded. I tried very much to talk about me, not her, and to not say a lot of negative things. I did say a little bit. I had to in order to say why I was triggered, but I didn't say a lot of stuff I could have said on purpose, because I wanted to protect her and I didn't want her to be too embarrassed. And so when I finished reading it, I said, how do you feel? And she said, Mom, you did a good job. I don't know how you wrote it in one chapter. That's a long story to tell in one chapter. And I said, does it hurt your feelings? And she said, not really. She said, the only thing is I don't like being called mentally ill. I don't like that category. So we talked about that. And I said, you're right. I said, I did talk about your recovery, but I didn't use the word recovery. I said, you're like an alcoholic never says I was an alcoholic. They'll say I'm an alcoholic in recovery. I no longer drink. And I said, I wish I had added that sentence in there, that my daughter is in recovery, because every year she gets stronger and clearer. So she's
Okay.
not free of her mental illness, but she's in recovery from the worst of what she was in before. Like an alcoholic that's out of control, she was somebody that was out of control because she didn't have the right treatment. She didn't yet have the medication that she needed. So when I talked about recovery, she felt better about that. I said, yeah, that's an important piece that I should have added. I'm glad we talked about it. I'm glad she and I
You
talked
know,
about it.
what would be awesome if she's open to maybe next round, she can write her story, her
I
version.
know. I know. I would love it if she would do that. She and I have talked about it. I've talked about writing a book with her. And
Oh, I
on
was
one
about to
page,
mention that. Yeah, I was about to
yeah,
mention
on
that. Yeah.
one page, my story, and on my version of what I was going through, and her version of what she was going through. I think it would be great. And she has a lot of wisdom to share. She's taught me so much about what it's like to be homeless, what it's like to be in a shelter. I didn't put that in the book. I'm just saying
Yes,
it. Yeah.
yes, yes,
But
yes.
but those kind of, I mean, she taught me so much about that. How she would look for the people that were safe, and you gather together and you lay on like in California, you sleep on a sidewalk on a cardboard box, but there's a circle of people helping each other. So many people help each other. And then there are good people that try to help you anyways. And then there are people in shelters that are paid minimum wage that know nothing about mental health and treat you very badly. So,
Sure.
there's a lot of stuff I've heard from her that I appreciate the wisdom that she's given me. And I think it would make
Sure.
a great book. But whether that'll ever happen or not, I don't know. Take courage on her part to,
Uh,
to write about her story.
Everything happens at the right time.
Exactly.
When the time
Exactly.
is
I agree with
good,
you.
ripe, she will be
Yeah.
to say, "Hey, mom, I want
Yeah.
to write a book. Well, let's write a
Yeah.
book together."
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And for a while she wanted to. Now she's feeling cautious again. So I just said to her, we don't have to do it if you don't want to, only if you want to.
Absolutely,
And how it
absolutely.
has to be. That's how it has to be.
Beautiful. Now, let's switch gears. Let's talk about impact. And this is the theme of this podcast. What would you say is a cause that is very dear to your heart?
Hmm. Wanting people to be free to be themselves. So that
Mm,
would include racism, any type of prejudice against religion, race, sexual orientation. all that. I want everybody, I want to support people in any way I can to be the best person they can be and to be free to be themselves in whatever way makes them happy and authentic. So
Yeah.
that includes all of the ways that we judge each other, to learn for all of us to learn to do a lot less of that, be more open to people being different than us.
Yeah. Wow. That's for sure. I agree with you. Now, listen, I love talking to you. You have such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. We may have to do a part two in a few weeks once the book is launched and see how book has impacted your life and all that. But for now, let's start wrapping things up. Let's finish by asking you a series of rapid fire questions on advices. Ready?
Mhm.
What would you say has been so far the best piece of advice you've received?
Hmm. Maybe my mother. My mother was a very wise woman. And when I was in high school, I tried out for cheering. That was my era. That was the big win for a woman to be a cheerleader in high school. That was a big honor. And I practiced and practiced and practiced, and I made the finals. My mother supported me in getting me a new outfit for the final for the first tryout, and I got a new outfit for the finals. And I didn't make it. There were only at that time you had to be a sophomore sophomores and juniors could try out for the junior and senior year, and I didn't make it. Only two junior girls made it, and I wasn't one of them. And I came home and I was very heartbroken because I had worked so hard for this, wanted it so badly. And my mother was appropriately, sympathetic. And then I went up in my room and I just laid on my bed and cried a little bit. And then my mother came upstairs a little bit later and she said to me, this sounds so harsh, but it really wasn't. She said to me, what makes you think? I know you wanted this so badly, but only two juniors were chosen. What makes you think that you should have been the one that was chosen? And again, it's a lesson of surrender, isn't it? What makes you think you should have been the one to be chosen? And it was like, it kind of jolted me, like, oh yeah, you're right. I got it. I really got it. And I've told that story to a few people and they think, well, that sounds so harsh, but it wasn't. My mother was such a loving person. But there were a few times when she felt like there was something she had to jolt you out of any kind of self-pity. That wasn't the path. And I wasn't somebody who did self-pity as a rule, but it was in my own. So in a way, it's interesting. That's a kind of another lesson in surrender, that I had to surrender to what is. Only two girls that should be chosen, probably 75 juniors tried out. I got close, but I didn't quite make it. I did make it my senior year. My junior, when I tried out my junior year for my senior, I was a cheerleader my senior year. So I was lucky to have that dream fulfilled, something I wanted, but I didn't get it the first time.
Okay. That's indeed a good one. Now, what would you say has been so far the worst piece of advice you've received?
Um, well, there's a bunch of them I could say, individual times that people gave me bad advice. I would say one interesting one powerful learning for me was we had a young family. We had two kids. My ex-husband and I had four kids, but at this time we only had two. We had a brand new baby, like 6 months old, and a 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old. We didn't have any money to go on a trip, and we were awarded. You know how you get those things in the mail? Now you get them online. You've been awarded a weekend trip to Maine. This was like a 2-hour drive from where this was going to be. And all you had to do was look at the weekend would be paid for at a motel. You'd get 2 meals and you get to go look at this property on a lake.
Oh, it was those presentations. Okay. I see.
So we thought that sounds like a good deal. We don't have any money. This is a way for us to have a vacation. So we took it. And the real estate person who's trying to sell you the property drives you around, and all the while you're in the car, the loudspeakers coming on saying, lot 7 just was sold. Lot 8, 3 people are bidding on it. To keep it all going, right? So anyways, we ended up spending, I don't know, money was different then, but say it was like maybe what 50,000 would be today. It was probably at that time it was probably 5,000 for a lot. And all we got was this piece of land with a right to build something on it. Now, there were going to be clubhouses around and all that stuff, but whatever the amount of money was, we had to get a loan to do it. So I always say that was the most expensive gift I ever received, but one of the most powerful lessons, in the sense that I learned never to make a decision that involves a large amount of money on the spot like that. I've many times I've gone to things where there's been offers made that you have to sign that day right within the hour, and I was going, sorry, I just can't do it. So it was a very, very powerful. It was like, it wasn't advice so much, but it was an experience, I think, that real estate agent taught us.
Yes, powerful indeed. Now, imagine that you were blessed with a time machine and you can go back in time and sit face to face with the 18-year-old Cynthia. What's the number one piece of advice with gift her, knowing all that you know now?
Oh my, wouldn't that be a wonderful conversation? Yes.
Oh, yes.
So one piece of advice would be accept yourself. I know it's hard to do. You're a unique person. Not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to think you're great. But there's certain people that you're going to meet that are going to think you're great. And those are your people. Beautiful. And whatever you can do to forgive yourself for not being whatever you think you should be is really an important task to go through. So it would be on that vein.
Beautiful. Love that. Now, do you have your own podcast yet?
I don't. I'm not very good at technology, Payman, as I told you.
All right. So tech. Okay. Well, we'll talk about that after. Imagine that you have a podcast today. It's very successful. And today you're interviewing the most special person in the world, which is yourself. What's the first question that you want to ask yourself? What's the first question that comes to your mind? Don't think too much.
It's hard to not think.
The first thing that comes to your mind.
Yeah. I guess I would say, what do you find is the most interesting thing that happens when you work with people? Like, what do you learn when you work with people? Something like that. I'd be asking those kind of questions.
And what's your answer?
And the answer would be that people are very different, and that so many people that are together in so many ways also have a part of them that doubts themselves. And so that's, I think, been one of the most profound things. I learned it very early as a therapist. I would have somebody call me that I would maybe know who they were in the community, but not know them. And I'd think, oh my God, that person is so together and they want me to help them. And then I would work with them and I'd see the vulnerable part of them. And that's, of course, the most appealing part of people. When you meet the vulnerable part of people, you fall in love with them. Do you agree? I mean, have you had that experience?
Yes, absolutely.
It's a beautiful thing. So I support people in being vulnerable and support them in loving themselves, forgiving themselves. Because sometimes we blame ourselves for not being good at something or not doing something that we think we should do better.
Absolutely.
So I'm big on supporting people in that.
I totally agree with you. Absolutely. Now, the last question, my favorite question to ask, and that is, what is the smallest thing you've done so far in your life that has had the biggest positive impact in both your life and business? And by small, I don't mean something small. I mean the one thing. For me, it's been starting my podcast. What about you, Cynthia?
I would say it was opening my private practice. And daring to do that, to be myself and do it my way, have the kind of office I want to have, the setting I want to have, everything the way I wanted to do it. I think that was very significant for me. I mean, I worked in somebody else's practice for a while, two gentlemen that had a practice, and I worked with them, and that was learning. But then when I went out on my own, I think that was a big step.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And if someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
So my email would be probably the easiest, and that would be Cynthia at centerforinnerpeace.net.
Okay.
And is that something that you can put on the screen when this is shown?
Absolutely. I will put it in the show notes.
You want me to spell it for you?
You can send that to me later after on Messenger, and I'll put it in the show notes after. Yes. Yeah. And okay. Do you have a website or any other thing you want to share as
I
far
do.
as
Yeah, I do have a
contacts?
website. It would be www.centerforinnerpeace.net. And I'll
Okay,
send that to you
beautiful.
as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely.
And then I
Let's-
also have 3 Facebook groups.
We'll
If
put
anybody
all that
wants
to
to
the show
join
notes.
them
You
up.
can
So I'll
send
send
me.
you that. Yeah, I'll send you
Yeah,
that.
so you can mention them now. Mention them.
Yeah. So I have one called Inner Peace for couples. One is called Inner Peace for family members with a mentally ill loved one, and one is called Inner Peace from stress to serenity. So
Beautiful.
somebody will fit in to either any of those 3 probably.
Love that.
The last one is kind of a general one, from stress to serenity. That's for kind of for anybody that
All right.
wants inner peace.
Okay, I'll put all of that in the show notes. So listen, Cynthia, absolute pleasure talking to you. As I said, you're an inspiration for all of us. I wish I can have half of your vitality when I get to where you are, to your age. You're phenomenal, beautiful smile, contagious smile, wonderful energy, and a wealth of wisdom. Can't wait to read your book. Keep shining your light, keep blessing the world for eons and eons to come. And stay safe, stay awesome. God bless you, my friend. We're definitely going to be speaking
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Thank you so much, Payman. A pleasure to meet with you and get to know you a little bit.
Same thing here.
Okay.
Pleasure all
Bye-bye.
mine. Take care. Bye bye.